fellow Falcoholic patrons. What is up? Welcome to the Falcoholic Lives Falcons Q&A and mailbag with our patrons. Always want to start the show off by thanking you guys for your support. Welcome George Costanza with the first comment. Of course, I should have guessed, but glad you could make it, George. Appreciate that. Yeah, guys, welcome. I know we have a bunch of questions from folks online. I know we often do this on Monday, so Friday today, so I know we'll probably maybe get a few different people in here, but in terms of different people, we also have some exciting guests joining us tonight. First of all, you see him. He is Jordan Watkins at Big75 Fella, still, I believe, on Twitter. Jordan, it's been a minute since we had you on the show. How you doing?
Oh, doing pretty well. It was fun hopping on, doing a little bit of the draft talks, and now happy to be back here.
Yeah, lots of stuff. This has been a busy off season, much better than last off season where it was pretty dire at times for sure. Also joining us, we have Jeanna Kelley at Jeanna Thomas on Twitter. Jeanna, welcome. I know we have the wonderful outdoor view. How are you doing out there?
I am doing very well. It's a beautiful day. Happy to be here with y'all.
Excellent. Well, guys, we have lots of great questions to get to. Those of you that are here live, feel free to put yours in the chat. We'll tackle as many of them as we can during this session. Before we get going, do want to thank our sponsor over at betonline.ag for their continued support of the show. Obviously, want to thank the patrons as well. You guys helped us get to the point where we have a sponsor, so definitely wanted to throw that out there for you guys too. But yeah, BetOnline is, of course, wait, I'm pulling up the script. Hold on. Everybody give me a second. Okay, it was supposed to load. It's not loading. It doesn't count as part of the 60 seconds. Okay, now it starts. Now you can start the timer, anyone who's counting. Okay. Today's show is brought to you by betonline.ag, your number one source for all your sports betting needs, including info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines for this year's NBA playoffs, which are ongoing and getting a little bit spicier, it seems like, with some teams maybe closing the gap a little bit. Of course, you can also bet on anything you want, including NFL futures and the Falcons if you're a glutton for punishment, but that's on you. No matter what you do, though, BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters this season, as they've got you covered for all your insider sports wagering needs, from the aforementioned basketball, NFL, MLB, NHL hockey, golf, all the way to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action, and be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, which is BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. So nailed that after we'll edit that out. We'll edit that out in post. No one else has to know about that. But let's start off with a question from Patreon. And then George just put one in. Sorry, George, we're going to have to wait because I already started reading Caesar's from Patreon. Thank you so much, Caesar. He says, with all these new additions on the defensive side of the ball, do you see the Falcons defense sort of struggling to start the season with all these new parts that are coming in? Jeanna, I'll let you get the first crack at it. I think that's an interesting one. A lot going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there were some actually pretty big shakeups. So there is going to be a learning curve. I mean, obviously they have the whole off season. Training camp is still ahead of us. We'll have preseason to work out some of the kinks, but in general, I wouldn't panic if the defense isn't living up to expectations in the first couple of weeks. It really might take them a few weeks to hit their stride.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable take, and I think I'd be inclined to agree. But Jordan, I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well. Do you think we could see a little bit of a slow start for this unit?
I think you can. I think you should expect it for the most part. And again, because there's certain steps and certain things you got to feel out, right? Like, for example, I know Ryan Nielsen, one thing he loves to do up front is he likes to run a lot of stunts in games. What makes those work is you understand fully how this person likes to step, what the angle they like to take. So, Grady Jarrett usually takes this angle. Now, Calais Campbell, David Onyemata, all these guys, they have to get used to that. So it takes a little bit of time, but again, like both of y'all said, it's not gonna worry me, after the first few games if it's not what we expected it to be.
Yeah, and they do. The schedule makers were a little bit more merciful this year with the week 1 matchup. Getting to go against the Panthers and Bryce Young in his probable first NFL start, probably going to be him. I would laugh if Andy Dalton was still starting. But you never know with these things. But so they're going to get the benefit of going up against a rookie quarterback. And Jordan mentioned it, like a lot of these players that they brought in were playing under Nielsen previously. So for them, it's not necessarily a brand new scheme, but there's a lot of players that were on the Falcons last year that are going to be transitioning to that new scheme. So I do think we probably won't see this defense hit its stride for like 6 games or so. But I think when it does, I think it could end up being pretty good. I think there's a lot of hope around this unit. There's a lot of new pieces in there. So there's definitely a lot of optimism. And again, like what Jordan said, I wouldn't be too concerned if after like the first 3 games, they're still in like the 20s, in a lot of stats, but I think we could see a real turnaround after that, like, and sort of continue to build, because you want to be good at the end of the season. The beginning of the season, obviously it's nice to be good at the beginning of the season too, but ideally you want to be getting hot at the end of the season. I mean, that's what the Falcons did in 2016. That almost worked out well for them. It worked out pretty well in the grand scheme, just the execution. We didn't stick the landing exactly, but, yeah, good question, though, to get us started.
What happened at the end of that year? I forgot. I completely wiped it from my memory. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, we don't talk about that anymore. But good question there, Caesar. Thank you for that. We got George with the comment saying he wanted this year to do another spicy bet. Last year he wanted to bet on the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, and that one almost nailed that. This year he's thinking betting on the Falcons to win the NFC, because the odds are pretty crazy. And he's saying Jags Falcons Super Bowl because memes are real. So look, if you want to make a lot of money, that's the Super Bowl to bet on, because I think you get at least plus 500 on the Jags, if not a lot more. And then Falcons is probably like plus 2,500 to be NFC champions or something. So, there's money to be made for the bold. I don't know if I'd put $1,000 on it though. That's on you, George.
Yeah, that's all him.
Yeah, scared money don't make none, right? So
True.
All right, we got Torin Bix on the Patreon as well, saying that he feels comfortable with how things stack up on the depth chart in general, but has some concerns at off-ball linebacker. Could you guys give us some perspective on that position group? Aren't we still missing an experienced true middle linebacker? Yeah, that's an interesting one, and it probably depends a lot on what you think Caden Ellis is going to be doing. So, yeah, Jordan, what do you think about that question? Do you think Caden Ellis is that off-ball linebacker, or are they sort of looking for maybe more reinforcements there at some point?
No, I mean, I think that's a good point. It's like you said, we saw, even last year, Caden Ellis was a little bit all over the place, right? For the Saints, he'd come in as a blitzer. Sometimes he'd be on the line as a rusher. And again, I know this possibility and the idea has been brought up a few times. Don't be surprised if maybe Rashaan Evans comes back. Like, I know we have, 10 million right now in cap space right around there. So you never know. I mean, that could be one of those things where, you're getting closer to training camp. Maybe certain things don't look the way that, the coaching staff and the front office want to look like. And so they do go back into free agency and bring somebody in. But yeah, I mean, again, it's just after 1 week of OTAs, it's so hard to see exactly what Caden Ellis is going to do. How does Troy Anderson look? It's a lot of still question marks with that. Yeah.
And yeah, where you think he's going to line up probably influences your thoughts on how strong the linebacker depth chart is. So if you think he's off ball, you're probably pretty confident. If you don't think he's off ball, then I could understand that you're pretty concerned. But Jeanna, also interested on your take on that position group. What do you think the idea is there? Do you think it is Caden Ellis as one of the 2 starters like full-time, or do you think it's maybe more of a committee approach? What are your thoughts?
I suspect that they're hoping that Ellis can be one of the 2 starters. And I agree with everything that Jordan said. We are just too early in this process for me to really have a fully formed opinion of that position group. But yeah, like you said, they don't have to be done building this year's roster. Even after the preseason, there are going to be guys who are available, who get cut. And so they've got plenty of time to sort it out. And, Ellis and Anderson have plenty of time too, to show the coaching staff what they can do so that they can effectively evaluate that.
Yeah. And like, I do think that Ellis is going to be playing off ball and starting next to Troy Anderson. I think that's sort of the plan. And the fact that they haven't really brought in any other linebackers maybe is a little bit of a hint towards that. But yeah, him playing that full time, it's something we got to see in the second half of last year. And Ellis's best games, according to PFF, which again, I have my issues with PFF, but it's nice for talking points. So his best games were at Mike and weak side linebacker. I believe his highest graded games were when he was playing off ball. So, and that's in addition to him being a good, Sam linebacker, rush linebacker type of player as well. I do think that he's got a lot of potential off ball to be that high end starter. I mean, I think overall he was like 7th in the NFL in terms of overall PFF grade at linebacker. So he's a guy that I think could be really underrated and be a like full-time starter no matter where he lines up. But yeah, I mean, I don't blame anyone for being a little bit concerned about how it'll shake out, because they're also sort of depending on Troy Anderson to be another starter, and we just don't really know what that'll look like. Last year, it was very up and down. This year, hopefully, it's a lot better. I mean, you certainly look at how much they invested in him in terms of the second-round pick and his potential, and it could be very good. It could also be a little bit sketchy. So I think, we'd all probably sleep a little bit better if another veteran was signed. I don't think they feel any pressure to do that. There's so many linebackers available in free agency. There seem to always be. Whether they could go back for Rashaan Evans, they could go for like another former Titan and Zach Cunningham, who's still out there if they're looking for more of that starter caliber guy. I mean, there's a lot of options available, so I don't feel like they feel like pressured into needing to sign somebody right now. Maybe they'll wait for, maybe the first preseason game or two, see how it's shaken out. And then if they need to go make that big addition, they're going to keep some money in their back pocket for an injury replacement or for a potential signing to bolster a position that's not working out like they thought. So, good question though, because the linebacker room, I think, is one of the ones where the depth is more questionable. And we just don't really know what Troy Anderson's going to be this year. Even though I'm very hopeful. I love Troy Anderson and think he's a really fun player. And he's one of those like real wild card guys, like where he could be the catalyst for this defense being way better than people think, or he could just not be good. So it's he just I love Troy Anderson. Sorry, I don't entertain the possibility that he won't be good, but theoretically it could happen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think I didn't even realize how, especially size wise, how similar he and Caden Ellis are, and I think that's one thing that's going to help, which is obviously Troy is probably a little bit more athletic because again he's an athletic freak, yeah. But I think that if there was ever a position where he needed to learn this defense, he has that right person next to him to figure it out. Also, I think that to make that transition even easier, we talked about how, Caden Ellis was that guy next to DeMario Davis who was coming on those blitzes and some of those stunts and schemes. Well, now, if you do move Caden over to make things easier for Troy Anderson, now he can be that guy that's coming on some of those blitzes. So another way to kind of make things a little easier for him in year 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Troy Anderson, perfect 10, RAS, just complete crazy athlete. But Caden Ellis, no slouch either, like you said, 8.54 RAS, so also elite athlete. And his 3-cone in particular was nuts. Caden Ellis had a 6.63 3-cone, which is 99.6th percentile, I believe, for linebackers. That is like faster than most wide receivers, guys. So it's pretty nuts. So he's very athletic. That linebacker group could be one of those things where it just sort of dramatically changes overnight. And I think that's definitely something to watch that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. Hopefully it changes for the better. That's fine. That's my hope. But, all right, we got Brandon Brass. What's up, man? Asking thoughts on spending a chunk of our available cap space on a deal for DeAndre Hopkins. I knew DeAndre Hopkins would come up today because it is the topic du jour, right? DeAndre Hopkins released by the Cardinals. Pretty big stain on that front office that they weren't able to find a suitor to trade him. So they basically have to eat all that money for nothing. Yeah, Jeanna, what do you think? DeAndre Hopkins, I didn't think it was an option when he was on his current contract because he was too expensive. But now that he's a free agent, you can make the money work however you want. What do you think about the Falcons potentially doing some sort of deal for DeAndre Hopkins? Wide receiver is a need, so.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan, especially, I'm like, yes, please get this done immediately. I just think that having a weapon like that in the arsenal would make this transition to full-time starter so much easier for Desmond Ridder, especially with the strength of this run game and the other receiving weapons that he would have around him, which would make it easier for DeAndre to make plays. You know, they're going to have to cover Pitts, they're going to have to cover London, they're going to have to account for Bijan. And so, yeah, adding a guy like that could make this one of the most fun Falcons offenses that we've ever seen. But as a person who covers the sport, I don't think it makes the most sense financially. He is going to be very expensive. This is the first time in many, many years that the Falcons have not been up against the cap and in like a cap crisis. And so, I think that from that perspective, I would prefer the team just, kind of save their money. They already do have a ton of top flight talent on that offense. So I think that as a fan, I would love to see it. As a person who covers the NFL, I don't think it would be the smartest business move for the Falcons.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it too. Now that he's a free agent, does he want to sign in Atlanta, where I think their team on the upswing, but is it going to be instant success like he's probably looking for going into his age 31 season? For wide receivers, it can fall off quickly. Sometimes it doesn't. You see Julio's a big warning case, of course, where unfortunately that just fell apart so fast and really broke all our hearts. But D-Hop is really intriguing, though. He hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, hasn't played a full slate of games recently, but still very effective. Jordan, what do you think about that potential for D-Hop coming to Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I see two different sides of it. The first one is I think it was I Am Athlete that he went on and he was talking about, hey, here are the quarterbacks I want to play with. He even broke down, I think, hey, I want stable GM and all these different things, right? And with the 5 quarterbacks, shocker, Desmond Ridder wasn't on that list, which would make me think that, whatever Kansas City or Baltimore or whomever else that was on that list could get him for, it would make us have to pay even that much more. So from that standpoint, I would say, no. But again, who knows? Because again, from your point about, a team on the ascension, that was part of the reason why I thought Calais Campbell coming here was going to be kind of a pipe dream. Again, you talk about someone now in their later 30s. Does he want to go to a team that's just on the rise or a team that's already there? And well, here he is. But the other side of it is, again, I know like one way a lot of people look at this is you look at just the receiver room, right? There's, with Drake, Mac Hollins, Scotty Miller. But we got to remember a lot of times wide receiver 2 or maybe wide receiver 1, depending on who's the X or Z, is going to be Kyle Pitts. So it's another thing to look into as well in terms of how certain formations and some packages look, where you got to put an 84 into that receiver room sometimes as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I think it is a need, but I think he's probably too expensive for that need. But it really depends on what he wants, and depends on what the other offers are. Because if the offers don't come for him, then he may be more willing to take a 1-year deal or something with a lot of incentives. But I sort of think that he's someone that teams are gonna open up the checkbook for. So in that scenario, the Falcons could do it if they wanted to. Like They haven't really touched any of their money they could create. They've left basically all the deals untouched. They could restructure guys and create a lot of money. I think it's wise to not do that and that to keep that flexibility for more important years probably going forward, because this is just the first step down the path to being a contender. And I think going all in, making moves for this year, probably not the wisest course, as much as, we'd all like to see the team just take off this season. I think they're going to take off. They don't necessarily need to go out and do crazy stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that still needs to happen for this team, and wide receiver is one of those areas where it's very much a work in progress, but they may want to save that cap for signing somebody in free agency next year, or potentially, another high draft pick at receiver, which could definitely be in the cards depending on how things shake out this year. All right, let's see. Next question from Mad Tom K. What's up, man? He says, which under the radar position battle do you think is the most interesting going into training camp? Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. Jordan, did you have one in mind? We talked about some of, kind of touched on some, but yeah, what are you thinking?
Oh, this is a fun one, and it's the favorite player that we drafted for us, and who's going to be a nickel. Obviously, I know we brought Mike Hughes in. I think he's supposed to be the leader in the clubhouse for that. But as you know, I am a huge Clark Phillips fan. And so I'm really interested to see kind of where he slides in everything. Can he be a guy that, once we get later into training camp and things like that, he kind of shows out as a player that, I saw him be at Utah and can kind of push that envelope a little bit. That's something that I'm really interested and intrigued in seeing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick a lot. And Clark Phillips was such a steal. I think you see fourth round, you're like, oh, maybe he'll be a depth guy. It's like, well, this is a guy that, in January mocks, this guy was going in the first round. So obviously measured in a little smaller, didn't test out crazy. But again, the tape is amazing. So you don't, I tend not, if guys have great tape, I think you can overlook some things. And maybe moving to the slot mitigates some of his size concerns, but maybe he's just one of those DJ Reed types at corner where it's like you can't take the outside out of this guy. Like, it doesn't matter that he's 6 inches shorter than Drake London. He was one of the only cornerbacks that actually played Drake London effectively. So maybe it just doesn't matter for him.
Remember, we had that one little small guy from Shippensburg a couple of years ago, number 20, that even though he was a little smaller, it didn't bother him either.
Yeah, it didn't seem to. So, yeah. Well, Jeanna, what do you think? You agree with corner, or do you have another battle that you're watching?
Yeah, it's always the offensive line for me every year. And that is in large part because the Falcons' offensive line is often a weakness. But it's also because there are so many factors that go into that unit functioning effectively. They've got to be able to develop chemistry. They've got to be able to anticipate how the guy on either side of them is going to play. So those are always the position battles that I enjoy the most. So looking forward to that and hoping that it works out for the best and Ritter stays upright this season.
Yeah. That the offensive line is, I feel like that's been one of the ones to watch like every single year now, for like the past 3 years. But I do think the options at left guard this year are a lot more encouraging because we've now seen Matt Hennessy fill in pretty well when he needed to last year. And that gives you like sort of a baseline level of confidence. But then you've got Matthew Bergeron, who, I think some people might look at that and be like, oh, well, is this Jalen Mayfield 2.0, right? Like, you're taking a tackle and converting him to guard and asking him to start week one. I think they probably learned from the Jalen Mayfield thing that maybe you don't take a tackle, then ask him to convert to guard, then make him play a tackle all training camp, and then make him move back to guard right before the season starts, because that, obviously didn't go great for Jalen Mayfield. But I do think Bergeron's a better prospect overall. Obviously he's a second rounder. Mayfield was a third rounder. Bergeron also is kind of the exact opposite of Mayfield, in that Bergeron actually does have tackle size too. So that's something you got in your back pocket. And Bergeron, I believe, had 38 starts, whereas Mayfield had less than 12. He only had the 1 year of starting. So very different players, even though they are guard tackle conversions. The Falcons aren't scared off by the conversion, but I think they maybe went with somebody a little bit different in terms of the experience profile and the size and that sort of thing. So yeah, that one's definitely the most fun to watch. When will Bergeron overtake Matt Hennessy? Because I know people will be pretty upset if he doesn't. But maybe he won't. Maybe Matt Hennessy is going to be good. All this, not that he's been terrible, but maybe this is Matt Hennessy's time. I don't know. Either way, the depth hopefully shakes out a lot better on the interior there. I guess for me, this one was kind of spurred. The obvious one's wide receiver, but it's really like wide receiver 4 or 5 is like the battle. So that's somewhat less intriguing because you're like, are these guys even going to play like meaningful snaps? But the other one that was kind of brought up by OTAs was maybe the depth safety battle, because it sounded like Micah Abernathy was actually getting the first snaps alongside Richie Grant with Jesse Bates not present. because he's celebrating the birth of his child. So shout out, congratulations, Jesse Bates. But so Micah Abernathy's out there. I've never seen Micah Abernathy play, but the coaching staff apparently has, and they like him. Obviously, it's OTAs, but maybe it's a little bit spicier than we thought. I think everyone sort of assumed Jalen Hawkins would be that guy, but this is a new secondary coach, new defensive coordinator. Maybe they're trying to go in a different direction there. So that one is interesting. And they also brought in DeMarco Helms, 7th rounder. They signed Trey Flowers, who has some safety flexibility as well, and then the XFL safety Lucas Dennis. So they have a bunch of guys in there now to that could be fighting for those 2 to 3 depth safety spots. So that's one under the radar one I'll go with there. Let's see, scanning for more questions here. Okay, yeah, we got Jordan Faust. This one is one that I have heard actually recently. What do you guys think about, on a similar vein to DeAndre Hopkins, what would you guys think about the Falcons bringing back Julio Jones to this roster to serve as veteran depth? I mean, the part of me that loves Julio Jones and still wears his jersey would love to have Julio back. I sort of doubt that either side is going to want that to happen. I think that ship has kind of sailed, but yeah. But it's fun, it's interesting. But we've all seen that he's not peak Julio, and I know you're not suggesting that either, Jordan. But in terms of depth, if he wants to play, I assume he'll be on a roster this year somewhere. So, But yeah, did anybody else have thoughts on the Julio Jones reunion?
No, I mean seriously, Julio does not want to come back here. It's definitely not happening. I would rather see him here than with the Bucks, but no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's unlikely.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. First off, Jordan, great name. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the overall scheme of things too, it's just, I guess with some of you just brought in Matt Collins. I don't know his contract numbers again right off the top of my head, but for whatever reason to me, it just kind of feels like, even though I know there are concerns and questions about the receiver group, what we have is what we have right now. And again, any of that cap space they have left is going to be left for, any injury situations that come up or anything else closer to the start of the season. So, I mean, same thing. The fan in me would love to see Julio back in black and red, right? I mean, I think it'd be hard pressed to find anyone that wouldn't want to see that. But in terms of looking at it realistically, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's tough to make it work. And then I think from the relationship standpoint, I think it's better to just let that lie until he comes back to join the Ring of Honor, and I think we go from there. So let him come back, have his celebratory moments separately. Well, continuing this line of thought, Brandon Brass, another former Falcons wide receiver, Mohamed Sanu, he says he has hinted he's wanted back. I would say Sanu has done more than hinted. I would say he's been openly advocating to return. What do you guys think about Mo Sanu coming back? I believe he is 33. So, not this isn't, Terrell Owens coming back or something. But yeah, what do you guys think? Mo Sanu reunion? Yeah.
Sanu is still in playing shape. Yes, he's getting up there in years, but he's still in playing shape. He would be very inexpensive. Especially because of his age. He is an excellent leader, an excellent locker room presence. And yeah, I love Mo. So I am a little bit biased here, but that would make me so happy. I would love to see him back in Atlanta. I would love to see him finish his career here. Also, we would automatically have an emergency quarterback. So yes, if somehow they went through all 3 quarterbacks in a game, we've still got Sanu in the back pocket ready to go. So another upside. Who says no?
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of Falcons fans are trying desperately to get rid of Felipe Franks. So if you have Mo Sanu to be your emergency quarterback, then that could be another option. Also, Troy Anderson, right? So we could have 7 quarterbacks. We're just bulletproof at quarterback. It's you could just keep knocking them down, and we just have guys in our back pocket that can throw the ball. So, yeah, Jordan, what do you think about Mo Sanu potential reunion there?
Yeah, eat your heart out, 49er fans. We have 7 quarterbacks. We don't need the new rule. But no, I think that it'd be interesting. I mean, the one thing I love about both. I think my mic just answered on this one. But no, I think the thing I love about both Julio and Sanu, again, you think about the veteran leadership aspect of it, and obviously bringing Mohamed Sanu in would do that, and like Jeanna said, a lot cheaper, I think, than what Julio would be. But I guess the other question then would become, what does he think he would be in terms of playing time here? Right. And because, again, you're not bringing him in to be like your full on WR2, in my opinion. So what would his expectations be in that? That's the only kind of question that I have, in that regard.
Yeah, I think it seems like he's aware at this point that he's probably going to be a depth player somewhere, but he just wants to keep playing. And I mean, he's put in the work with like Desmond Ridder, right? I guess, I mean, there were all those reports that he was out throwing with Desmond Ridder in the depths of the offseason, just, as someone to practice with. So look, they got that chemistry already ready. But look, I mean, Mo Sanu, I think, obviously a really good run blocker. That's something that it's kind of become a meme, but like they have not signed a single receiver that isn't a good run blocker. So they clearly value that a lot. They expect everybody out there to be run blocking. He's really good at that. I imagine he's capable on special teams. Probably hasn't had to play it in a while, but I assume he's willing. And look, he wants to be here. I mean, kind of like Calais Campbell. He's like, I just want someone to want me, and like he wants to play. And, I wouldn't be upset at all. I mean, Sanu was never a guy that crushed it with his crazy athleticism, so it's not like he's drastically different from when he was, playing in Atlanta a few years ago. He's always won with his physicality and sort of savviness out there. So, yeah, I have no problem with that. I mean, I don't think anyone would be expecting a lot, but as like maybe a wide receiver 3 caliber guy, probably your backup for Mac Hollins, Drake London as one of those bigger guys. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed at all to bringing him in and having him in camp and seeing what you could do there. So we'll see if they end up doing that at some point, but it's interesting. I mean, I do think it's more realistic than Julio, certainly.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Probably more realistic than DeAndre Hopkins too.
I'm all for Bean talking the Benz.
Oh yeah. All right, we got Nico with a more general football question here. What do you guys think about the recently announced kickoff rule change? So for those that don't know, the kick, Jordan, I can tell you got takes already. Okay. But yeah, the rule is, I believe, that you can now fair catch the ball anywhere inside the 25 and it will be placed at the 25. So even if it's not in the end zone like a touchback, it will still go out to the 25. So you could catch it at the 5 and fair catch it. So basically it will eliminate kickoff returns for anyone that wants to fair catch it. So, there's no way to get around going to the 25 now. So there's a lot of takes on this. But yeah, Jordan, I can see you're ready to go. So go ahead.
No, I mean, it's just tough for me because I think about how, I know a lot of people look at some contracts that you see in the NFL and it's like, oh, these guys are getting paid, guaranteed contracts, things like that. Right. And the reality is, again, the majority of the people on NFL rosters, they're just trying to hope they make it week to week. Right. And a lot of ways that you make it or you stay on rosters is on special teams. Now, if all of a sudden you take away, kickoff and kickoff return to an extent, that makes it even harder for some of these people to stay on rosters. That their importance is kind of taken away. And that just makes it even difficult. I know a lot of my former teammates, like, for example, Michael Thomas, who I think he played in Miami first, kind of got his name on special teams, had a big pick on Brady when he did have to play on defense. But for the most part, he's made his living in this league the last, 6-7 years by being a big time special teams guy. And so now you're going to see a lot less of those because, again, the importance of kickoff and kickoff return is going to be diminished by this rule. So that's the thing that's, as putting on my former player hat, that's the hard part for me and why I don't like it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Jeanna, what do you think as well?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jordan just said. I mean, I think that it's a really underrated element of this. I know that there is a higher percentage chance that somebody's going to be injured and specifically suffer a head injury during a return. So I get that, but you're also not going to stop putting players through 4 quarters of minor car crashes, that they're getting into with their bodies. So yeah, it might eliminate a couple of concussions, but I think the league needs to think more broadly about how to prevent those and look at things outside of changing rules, because it diminishes the value of the punter, the gunners. I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't like it. They're always messing with stuff that doesn't need to be messed with.
Yes, reminds me of when they made pass interference reviewable. And that was a disaster. So it may only be here for 1 year. It is just a trial. But yeah, I mean, the fact that basically every special teams coordinator had signed on and said, like, we oppose this, and they did it anyway, is pretty crummy. They basically took the people who know the best about this and said, like, we don't care. And I think they're like, I don't really know what their angle to this is. I mean, I know they're claiming it's to reduce injuries, and there's definitely a part of it that's that. But at a certain point, it's like, just put the ball to 25 then. Like, if you're gonna go that route, like, but it's still an option to return. I imagine teams with good returners will still do it. I do wonder if it will lead to sloppier kick coverage, because guys will be so used to people fair catching that they're not ready when someone actually takes it back. So maybe there's an opportunity for the really good kick returners to catch some teams sleeping a little bit. Maybe there's opportunities for a little bit of gamesmanship. If people kick it short, maybe you start returning them, that sort of thing. Maybe it creates some sort of game within the game, weirdness. You never really know. But ultimately, I don't think it's good. And they've already made so many changes to the kickoffs. They've made onside kicks almost impossible. So at a certain point, it's like, either get rid of it or just leave it alone, because you just keep changing it and making it harder and harder for these players. So yeah, I mean, I'm sort of with you guys on that one. I don't know that it needed to be changed again at this point, especially when, like I said, the special teams coaches said no. So listen to your coaches, listen to the people that actually run these things,
100%. I mean, like, you look at other leagues too. I think the XFL, they have, their kickoffs different, where I'm not sure the exact, the numerical data, but, their injuries and concussions and whatnot on kickoffs is definitely lower than what it was in the NFL. And then again, with the health part, like, I don't disagree. I know that's part of it, but then you can't say you're doing health for that and then saying that you're now able to flex Thursday night games. Like, it doesn't go together.
No.
But
sensing a little bit of foul play there, perhaps, maybe a little bit of disingenuous behavior by the NFL. Not that they've ever done anything disingenuous in their history, but can't only think of, let's see, how many things do it. Too many to count. But yeah, that's a good question. That is one of those more interesting things. And Nico mentions, the USFL has a different rule too. They haven't had any serious injuries on their kickoffs yet. So yeah, I mean, maybe it needs more of a makeover, but I do think that eliminating it entirely, it's sort of like guts a core part of the game that, like, it doesn't get the shine that offense and defense does, but it is a core part of the game. It's part of the 3 phases. And I think you're hurting the game and sort of doing a disservice to the history if you cut it out to such an extent that it's not really a factor at all anymore. So I think safety, all for it. Find a way that's going to keep the product on the field good. And we've seen leagues that are more creative, like the XFL and USFL, find intriguing ways to continue doing kickoffs. So I think that's something to consider for sure. Or the whole 4th and 25 thing. I think that's interesting too. If you're going to basically, litigate the onside kick out of the league, then at least give teams some kind of option that has a chance to work. So definitely interesting.
Agreed.
Though. Yeah. All right. We got Nico also asking about the possibility of Corey Davis coming here. I've talked about Corey Davis a lot. I sort of thought he'd be released by now. It's a little odd that the Jets are holding on to him, despite the fact that he's supposed to be like the 4th wide receiver on the depth chart at this point. And he's making $11-12 million. I know Nico's saying, oh, well, if they sign D-Hop, then the Falcons can go get Corey Davis. But yeah, I think the Jets are sort of fishing around for someone to trade for him. which again, the whole thing comes up of like, well, who's paying $12 million for Corey Davis, who not necessarily through any fault of his own has been trapped with Zach Wilson for several years, and just that hasn't really worked out. But other than Garrett Wilson, nobody's really worked out there. I mean, Elijah Moore, they just traded away. So, yeah, I'm curious. Your guy, I've talked about Corey Davis a lot. I'm a big fan. I think he makes the most sense for Atlanta than any other team. Obviously, the connection with Arthur Smith, one of the best run blocking wide receivers. He would give them that wide receiver too that they really need, but haven't heard you guys take on that. If he were to become available, Jeanna, is that somebody you would want to go after and potentially give a decent contract to?
Yeah, I've always liked Corey Davis too. And like you said, I think that his relationship with Arthur Smith would be very beneficial. It would be really easy for him to come in and learn the system, which would give him an advantage over most other receivers that might be available. So, yeah, I mean, I would be on board with that.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Jordan, what do you think about potential for the Corey Davis reunion with Arthur Smith?
Yeah, I know I'll sound kind of hypocritical, as I know a few questions ago I already said I think that the receiver room, what it is probably what it is. But I think this is a situation, though, where, again, like Mohamed Sanu, if the Jets do decide to trade with us, let's just say they don't release him, obviously the first question is, okay, how much of this contract are you going to eat if you're in New York? So that way, if all of a sudden he's here like $4 or $5 million, that looks a whole lot more like, okay, yeah, I think we might do this and make this happen. Then you still have that security around $5 million blanket for anything else that pops up in the year. And yeah, again, I just feel like if you do that and you make that room look at least a little bit better than what it is, and I think Corey Davis is someone that can do that, then yeah, I'm all for it. But I guess to your point, Kevin, I thought that if Corey Davis was going to be a Falcon, whether it was because he was released or by trade, I thought I'd see it happen by now. And again, in terms of, I thought the Jets would be much more willing already to let him go.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Well, keeping the wide receiver train going here, because that seems to be the topic du jour, apparently. Had a question about which of these, basically who's our favorite for that fifth receiver, because I think for myself, I've got, Drake and Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller and Kaderil Hodge sort of penciled in as the first four for various reasons. But, fifth, sixth guys, there's so many guys they brought in. I'm curious where you guys are leaning. Jared Bernhardt probably would have been my fifth, but he retires. So yeah, Jordan, curious, do you have a favorite right now of all the guys for that last wide receiver spot?
I do have a favorite, but that's because he was my old teammate, so I'm biased. Of course, they just brought in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So, that was, he was my teammate at Stanford. But again, you think about, like you said before, all the people that they brought in terms of, he's a big, tall, physical guy, good run blocker. You had to be a good run blocker if you're going to play at Stanford, because that's what we always did. And, he's just one of those guys where, I know it didn't work out in Philly, but even what I had seen in terms of, his hands catching ability, things like that, it was a lot better than what I saw in Philadelphia. So I really do believe that a fresh start for him is just what he needs. But again, like I can't help it. I got to pull for my former teammate. So that's going to be my pick.
No, that one I think makes a lot of sense too. You mentioned it. Like last year he played a lot of, I guess technically 2021, but played a lot of special teams and graded out really well. And obviously run blocking, one of his strengths. And people think it's a meme that like we talk about that with wide receivers. No, that's what the Falcons care about. Like if you can catch the ball, that's secondary. You got to block. You got to block your ass off first. But Jeanna, do you have a favorite right now of all these wide receivers we got in here crowding up the roster?
Actually, I also really like Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah.
So I was really excited when I saw that they signed him. I always thought that he had, significant potential and just maybe not the right fit to live up to it. So yeah, change of scenery can be really good for guys, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah. No, I agree. And for me, I've mentioned like a bunch of guys on like every different show. So, but I'm sticking with Xavier Malone, the Henderson State UDFA, reportedly mid to low 4.2s. Some crazy person said he ran a 4.19. I don't believe it, but if you watch his tape, like put on Xavier Malone Henderson State tape and just like laugh, because it is hilarious. Like I think he had almost 2,000 yards. Well, he had a lot of yards. I don't remember. I'm getting him confused with other UDFAs, but lots of yardage, a ridiculous number of touchdowns, and I think he averaged over 20 yards per reception on like 70 catches. And he just is running away from every single person in Division II and breaking tackles. And this is a guy who's 5'7", 180 or so. Not a big guy, but his contact balance was surprisingly good. So I think that's something that you often see with these smaller speedsters, that they can't survive contact. And he didn't have a problem with it. He went up for some contested catches, and he bounced off of tacklers and got out. And obviously, we're talking about Division II, so, keep that in mind. But in Division II, they can still tackle. That's not the problem in Division II. It's typically the athleticism is a little bit lower. These guys can still tackle. I mean, it's still college football players. But he's really interesting if they're looking for more of that speedster. But, I don't know what they want. Because they've got Scotty Miller, and they've got, that sort of archetype with him and Xavier Malone and Keelan Harris and Frank Darby and Slade Bolden and those types of guys. And then they've got, the bigger mold with Ortega-Whiteside and Justin Marshall, Mac Hollins, Josh Ali, these bigger receivers. So it's I don't know which one they, want to keep as, their fifth guy or maybe sixth guy at this point. But, yeah, it's going to be, it's wide receiver 5. It's, not the sexiest thing, but it's fun to, see all these receivers, fighting it out. I mean, there's, 8 guys competing for maybe 1 or 2 roster spots, and that's always fun. To see when it really is that wide open. It could be any of these guys. All right. Yes. So if anybody else has further questions, get those in. I know we had one more. But yeah, if you guys have any more, drop them in and we'll wrap up here shortly. But I know we had one. Sorry, I forgot who asked it. But the potential for Michael Pruitt to return has gotten brought up. And, a guy that came in right before camp last year also, it was a little bit later in the process, ended up earning basically tight end 1 honors by the time it was all said and done after Kyle Pitts got hurt. But what do you guys think? Jeanna, I'll let you go first. Do you think about a potential Michael Pruitt reunion? They didn't really bring in anyone other than Jonnu Smith, who was sort of a unique tight end in his own right. So what do you think about that potential reunion there?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility, especially since he would already know the scheme. Yeah, I like Jonnu Smith. I thought that was a really smart decision for the Falcons, but you got to carry 3 tight ends. You carry at least, you can't just have 2 guys and hope for the best, not with how violent this league is.
Yeah, I think they kept 5 at one point last year. I think they had 5. So they're going to keep at least 4, I imagine. Some teams do only keep 3, but like Jeanna said, potential spot for him still. Maybe some other guys they want to see first. I don't know. But what do you think, Jordan, looking at that tight end depth chart? Do you think you would bring in Michael Pruitt to really solidify that group?
So here's where, I have this evil genius scientist mind at times. I love the idea of them going a 13 personnel with Kyle Pitts out there. He's outside a receiver. And, Jonnu, maybe he's a receiver or slot, and Mike Cole's in there too. Because usually you hear 13 personnel, everyone's going to think, okay, that's a run formation. Whatever they're doing, they're running the football. And then all of a sudden you have no idea where everyone's lining up. So just the thought process of that, it really just popped in my head, and I really love it. I don't know if y'all saw on Twitter a few weeks ago, I was kind of joking around of I'd love to see us just open up in triple option wishbone one game just for the fun of it. But no, I mean, I think that'd be great. It's also interesting to see, obviously they love their bigger tight ends. They love to keep as well, again, for that inline blocking. Obviously John Fitzpatrick, who was on IR last year, guys like Parker Hesse. So it'd be just interesting to see what kind of balance, kind of like what you said with receiver, right? You have your bigger guys and you have your small speedsters. So what's the balance of that they want to have?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And, to me, it's I wonder if they're just trying to get to see John Fitzpatrick and Tucker Fisk a little bit more, but that Michael's probably still on speed dial, which is basically what happened last year too. They got to look at the guys they had in and they're all right, let's get Michael Pruitt in here. And, what you have in Michael Pruitt. He is getting into his early 30s. So, I get the desire to find, younger options there, but he had that instant chemistry with Ritter. I don't think I would mess with that. I would have already brought him back personally, but I do want to see what we've got in John Fitzpatrick, and obviously Parker Hesse is still here to be one of the primary blockers. So they have a group, if they can get John Fitzpatrick basically to fill that Michael Pruitt role or be that, reliable blocker and occasional receiver, then maybe they don't necessarily need to make that move. But I just feel better about the depth basically if Pruitt is back in the building. But yeah, I like that tight end group as a whole, obviously, with Pitts and Jonnu Smith and Parker Hesse leading it off. So pretty good group there. But yeah, guys, well, I don't see any more questions, so I think we are all good with today's show. Really appreciate every patron for coming in and hanging out with us. Appreciate all the questions from online. Really appreciate your guys' support all year long. There will be an update soon on the Patron Fantasy Leagues. I imagine we'll probably have to go to 3 this year because we have, I think, 40 patrons now. So probably have to go to 3 leagues. So keep an eye out for that. We'll probably get started setting those up in June, July, and do our usual offline draft stuff. But make sure to keep your eyes open for that. If you're watching the show after it's aired and you're interested in getting involved with those Patron Fantasy Leagues or the Patreon in general, the link is patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. If you're watching this also, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Before we take off, I want to thank tonight's wonderful guests. First of all, Jordan Watkins at Big 75 Fella. Jordan, I forget what you're up to these days, so please let the people know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, right? Usually broadcasting on Pac-12 Network. Now the Warriors season's done, so I'm not doing stuff with them right now, but a lot of times you can catch me at NBC kind of working in production stuff for all the 11,000 teams that they cover out here in the Bay Area. But yeah, that's usually it. But this is always fun. So looking forward to being on here a lot more here soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for coming on. Always a pleasure chatting it up with you. And of course, we had with us the wonderful Jeanna Kelley at Jeanna Thomas on Twitter, still at SB Nation crushing it, and occasionally writing bangers at the Falcoholic. Jeanna, anything else that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, so if you watch Succession, go to sbnation.com and read about the conspiracy theory that I wrote about today. First of all, it involves a World Series play that I was not aware of from 1920. And secondly, it really might be the key to who ends up taking over Logan Roy's throne. So, so obviously I'm working really hard on football related stuff.
You're just writing bangers. It doesn't matter what sport now. That's what happens. True. So yeah, no, I have to check this out. So I know you mentioned it earlier, like, oh, sorry, I was distracted down the Succession rabbit hole. But I mean, as one does, right? So
yes.
But yes, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everyone for tuning in with us tonight. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. The show is Falcoholic Live, Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. You can find us on all your podcast platforms, here on YouTube. We will be off on Wednesdays, Falcoholic Live this week, as I'll be celebrating Caroline, my wife's tenure. So we're excited about that. So we will be off having some... What was that? Was that some kind of creature?
That was a dog, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and it did not sound like whatever is happening is going well. So
yeah, that's what happens when you're outside. You never know what's going to happen out there. So
no,
it's
you
dangerous.
don't.
So we probably should wrap this up so you can get somewhere safe. But yeah. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. Like I said, we'll be off on Wednesday, but we'll be back the week after with some more tremendous content as we get to, unfortunately, one of the slowest parts of the NFL calendar. But it's all opportunity for all of us to relax a little bit. But no, I'm sure you'll all be arguing about 2 or 3 Desmond Ridder throws at OTAs. So that's fine. I don't, that's your prerogative. Do what you want. Thank you guys again. We'll talk to you next time on the Falcoholic Live. Today's show was presented by BetOnline. So didn't forget it this time. Sometimes I have to add that back in, So I'm getting better, guys. I'm getting better at this.
There
time.
we go.
So,
hey, week to week improvement. That's all that matters.
That's all. That 1% every day, right? 1%.
There we go. There we